Participate, engage, speak out, use your voice to be an effective advocate. The Voices in Advocacy podcast examines the diverse landscape of advocacy, exploring the ins and outs of building influence, driving change, and creating champion advocates. It's now time for the Voices in Advocacy podcast with your host, Roger Rickard.
Hello and welcome to the Voices in Advocacy podcast. I'm Roger Rickard, president and founder of Voices in Advocacy, where we work with organizations to inspire, educate, engage, and activate your supporters by turning them into effective, influential advocates. And this is the podcast dedicated to the art of advocacy. This is for the people that work and engage in advocacy efforts for their organizations, be they corporations, associations, trade organizations, and nonprofit cause groups. Hey, we're proud to have RAP Index as a sponsor of the show. Let's face it, today's advocacy arena is just plain noisy. Organizations are stretched. You need every advantage to make sure your issue gets the attention it deserves and your voice heard. The RAP Index is the best way to do just that by finding your stakeholders' relationships and engagement power. Get past the noise, know who your people know, go to rapindex.com, that's R-A-P index.com, and tell them Roger sent you for a special offer. Now, let's get started. In today's episode, we meet Aaron Bludworth. Now, for the past 13 years, Aaron has served as the CEO of Fern Expo, where they specialize in exhibitions and events management. He received his education from the University of Utah, the David Eccles School of Business, with a degree in business administration and political science. We'll hit on that as we go through today. Aaron has served as the president of the Exhibition Services and Contractors Association, as well as the chairman of CEIR, the Center for Exhibition Industry Research. And in 2019, Aaron received IAEE's, that's the International Association of Exhibition and Events, Inaugural Humanitarian Award for his continual efforts to enhance the lives of those whose path he crosses professionally and personally. Thank you, Aaron, and welcome to today's show.
Thanks, Roger. Great to be here. Great to hear your voice and hope to see you again in person soon.
Boy, wouldn't that just be a treat for, well, I know it'd be a treat for me and a treat for all of us as we try to get back to normal in-person events. So as we start, can you explain to listeners exactly what Fern Expo does?
Yeah, it's always a tricky question. Even though we've been around for 110 years, it's still kind of a mystery. But we're basically a cross between a logistics, a construction, and a marketing company. And we take and work with show organizers, trade associations, corporations that are putting on events, bringing people together, and we provide the infrastructure for that. Some of it's technology, a lot of it's the physical stuff. We take an empty convention center or a hotel ballroom and turn it, take a couple of days, turn it into a little city. It runs for a couple of days and we tear it back out. But in the process of that, we're supporting the marketing effort. We're bringing communities together. We're getting an environment where commerce can happen and helping people build relationships.
Well, I think that was a pretty good explanation, and you've been in business for 110 years. That's fabulous. So how many expos, events does your team work on in a typical year? And I know we're not in a typical year.
Yeah, typically we produce around 1,500 trade shows a year, varying in size from very small to some of the largest in the country. In addition to that, a few thousand smaller events that range from someone renting some equipment to us just providing, support for a smaller event. But around 1,500 trade shows where people are actually gathering together to conduct business.
I have seen the Fern Expo trucks on the road as I'm out and about, and that just shows the level of how much business commerce you conduct. And I love the explanation of creating these small little cities inside the convention centers. I think that gives a visual to our audience that is not used to that, so that they can get a sense of really what Fern does.
Well, we're kind of behind the scenes, so people go to a show and they assume that that stuff's already all there. But little do they know, we get this concrete box, and we, in just a few days, turn it into something. And by the time they show up, it looks fairly finished, and then we take it out, and the next group moves in. But you mentioning seeing our trucks, I love when people send me pictures of our trucks in odd and diverse places all over mostly in the U.S., but occasionally they see our brand internationally. I love getting notes from people saying, "Hey, I just saw your truck in Miami Beach. I saw your truck in Seattle. I saw your truck in Los Angeles." And truly, it's a business that takes us everywhere.
Yeah, and it's great, the engagement that you bring. You help bring people together so that they can be educated, network, provide the commerce. It's a wonderful thing. Now, you're the CEO. So as a leader and a CEO, what can associations in your field do to create better engagement to help protect and defend your business? And I know your passion, your employees.
Yeah, I like this question because it calls for a distinction, I think. And I like advocacy best that defends my business and right to conduct business. I think that's more important than asking for something. And usually in my business, I'm saying, hey, just make sure we maintain a good platform to continue to conduct business the way that we've done so, for over a century, and don't interfere with that. We're not looking for some type of a gift. Typically, we're looking for just a fair playing field where we can keep operating. And I think I can, if it's okay, I'll share a quick story about advocacy in our industry that I think represents exceptional industry participation and how our industry came together. But I'll preface it with, part of advocacy is not dragging any party unnecessarily through the mud, especially once an issue has been amenably resolved. So I'm going to kind of keep this anonymous and not give the names of the organizations because I think that's part of us having a good, fair advocacy outcome. But this model has been used several times since the story I'm going to share, so the names aren't even really that important. But most of the work that we perform happens in publicly owned facilities that were built, or at least backed by tax dollars, and they were built in those communities for to drive economic activity to the market, whether that's filling hotel rooms, restaurants, getting businesses to move there, whatever. The taxpayers and the government leaders chose to build that venue so they could drive economic activity in their community. And these facilities should provide as much economic impact and opportunity as possible, while providing value to the users. And this is done by ensuring a competitive and open market in the facility. And occasionally, venue management looks at the services we provide or others in our space provide, and they see that as a revenue opportunity to help fill their budget. And thus threatening to kill some of the very economic activity that these venues were built to create and provide. And in one case, a venue announced bringing several services in-house that had historically been provided by providers like us or others in the industry. And that was a threat to the existing providers, to their employees, our employees. And it also leads to an increase in prices and reduced quality to the customers. They lose that competitive option to bring in providers who can best serve them and compete on price. So what happened is ESCA, IAEE, and CISO quickly banded together and created an alliance for addressing this. And this was a city-owned facility. And we were very aggressive at addressing these matters with various venue stakeholders. So the venue management, the community that owned it. I met with the mayor a few times, became so in regular contact with the mayor's chief of staff who was handling this matter that they recognized my voice. Mine, kind of like yours, Roger's, fairly noticeable and recognizable, but that chief of staff recognized my calls, and we got to know each other pretty well through this process. But what happened is we really brought the force of several providers being displaced that wouldn't have had the power individually without the backing of ESCA, CISO, IAEE in this case. They represented the customer, the end user, the people that were saying, we're going to bring our community to your venue. That's where the power was. And they said, and these are our partners. These are the people that serve us all over the country. We need you to let them conduct their businesses in a way that serves us well and creates a a good return for your city that you've invested in this venue as well. So we stayed on this issue until it was favorably resolved, but it took many parties and a concerted effort to get this done. And in my view, the industry was at its finest in that moment. And several times as we've done similar things since, that's exactly what we bind together for as a trade association. And for us to be able to go and put our best foot forward together as customers, providers, all people who are looking to build the exhibition industry, it just had a fantastic outcome, and we've used it several times since.
You bring up a great point. By using the customer, what is the customer's needs in this, and being able to open the eyes of people that aren't necessarily seeing it in the same vein that we see it as, or you see it as being one of those service providers. And I love the comment, you're free and fair. Just give us the opportunity for free and fair commerce, and we can do the best. We can do the rest with that. Great story. Thanks for sharing that. And that example could be played out in 1,000 different places and at 1,000 different times. We often know that particularly local municipalities are always looking for ways that they can turn around and create additional tax dollars in their mind, and kind of defeat the purpose, as you indicated earlier, of the economic development of new money coming into a city.
Yeah, no names mattered for that story. It was really, that's a replicable model and a situation that occurs from time to time. And this was just a great example of the associations coming together and solving it.
So I asked this question of all of my guests, and you may have somewhat answered it, but specifically, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of advocacy?
Yeah, I think about it as, the first thing that comes to mind is advocating to the government, but it's a lot more than that. So I think of it as advocating to politicians or the government about some type of issue or need, but it's bigger than that. And, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and to that very point, I often point out what I call the 7 branches of the advocacy tree. And yes, it includes government, but it's media, and it's a public service, and it's people, and it's industry, and it's brand, and it's cause. And all those things really encapsulate what advocacy is. Would you agree with that?
I do, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you see the role of individuals in advocacy and in the governing arena? And let's make this kind of a big picture question, just as a citizen. How do you see our individual roles?
Yeah, it's interesting you say as a citizen, because I see it 2 ways, both as a citizen, the individual citizen, right, and as individuals as part of communities. And whether that's a community, whether that community is a business or an industry or an issue or a cause, it's individuals representing that. And dollars in advocacy can help open doors and build campaigns, but at the end of the day, it's really individuals that connect, create emotions, make representatives feel an obligation, et cetera. That's not the dollars. That's not a contribution. That's not a TV ad. It's me meeting with somebody, telling a compelling story, and pleading to them for why they're obligated to move in my direction. Not just that they could or should, but why are they obligated to move in my direction? And getting that emotional connection as to why, that's where it really matters, in my opinion. And this is true whether advocating for a zoning change, a local park, impacting international trade travel. It's all the same. It's, hey, can I come and emotionally connect with somebody as an individual, regardless of what I'm representing? If that's my business interests or the fact that I want my kids to have a park to play in, it's the same thing. I've got to go and connect and make someone feel obligated to my position.
I'm really grateful that you brought up whether it's a local zoning, a park issue, whatever the case may be, because people often think that, particularly advocating with government, that you're really advocating with Washington, D.C. And when you look at Washington, D.C. from an elected standpoint, you only have 537 people that are elected in D.C. The president, vice president, the 100 in the Senate, and the 435 in the House. Yet there's 529,000 local elected officials in this country. And these are often the people that we know that live down the street from us, that go to our church or temple or tabernacle with us. It doesn't matter, or synagogue, it just doesn't matter. You know those people. So how do you
on that point, Roger, sorry to interrupt your question, but I've felt a lot more important meeting with people in Washington, but I felt a lot more successful meeting with people in little towns and state capitals and places like that where we've accomplished a lot more. So there's a feeling, there's an air of Congress and Washington, but being successful at getting issues addressed is much more local. Like they say, all politics is local. That's truly the case in most of the issues that any of us will ever deal with.
Yeah, and tying that together, Aaron, is the fact that these are the people that have to make things work. They have to turn the water on. They have to make sure that the garbage is picked up. They have to make sure that there are roads and bridges that work and function, because the collapse of local municipalities, whether that's cities, towns, townships, counties, all those people really get the work done, and they want to. They're problem solvers.
They're much more accountable.
Absolutely. It's harder to go to the grocery store locally when you don't get that thing done for that. So why have you personally always taken such an interest in advocacy? Because, I have been following you for the last numerous years, and I always see you speak out on the things that really personally matter to you. And I think you use your voice very effectively. So why have you always taken such an interest in that?
Maybe I'm just a big mouth, Roger. I don't know. You cross a line at some point where you've said too much, you might as well just keep going and defending the things you believe in. But I've seen the power of advocacy from different angles, and I work in an industry that's both important and obscure. So I think that drives a little bit more. We don't have a natural spotlight on us like a lot of industries do. And when I've been involved in advocacy work locally or national, there's always an aha moment by the party that we're meeting with. Usually it's kind of just recognizing that we even exist. But as time's gone on and we've our efforts have gotten better and more sustained as an industry, some of the stuff we've done together, in fact, as that's gotten more sustained, then those aha moments are more about the size of the hidden industry and the number of people we employ, the number of industries we serve, the breadth of our geographic coverage, and of course the economic impact created. And the more people are familiar with us as individuals in the industry, and the industry as a whole, the easier it is for us to address things that come up. But you were asking, I think, more broadly just in general, but for the industry, it really comes down to, hey, I'm in a hidden industry that doesn't get a lot of attention. And occasionally we have needs and issues like the story I shared, and we want to be prepared to have people we can call on to address those things when they come up. But, on kind of the more broad, I don't know what it is, but if I believe there's, something that is just and right, I'm going to talk about it. And I'm just not, I guess that's part of my role in leadership, part of my background, and having spent a little bit too much time related to politics, and all of that combined, and maybe the big mouth piece we talked about. If I see an issue that I think needs to be talked about, and I think I can have even a little bit of impact, I'm going to talk about it at least a little bit.
Well, I think that's a lesson that all of us listening today can actually adhere to. Is there a way that we can have a conversation about the things that matter the most to us? And can we have that conversation and respectfully disagree? And the whole point to that is, we can respectfully disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that's one of the great points that you always seem to bring out when you do speak out. And I wouldn't call it a big mouth. I would refer to your ability to be able to communicate with people, and they see the passion of whatever you're bringing forth with that. And I'd like to add another point, because we have worked together on issues for the exhibitions industry through the Exhibitions Mean Business Coalition that has been put together. And one of the things that we pointed out to people was, in every single congressional district in this country, there are businesses that buy and sell their goods and services by attending exhibitions and trade shows and events. And that's vitally important, taking it back to the local level. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, if we're dealing with an issue with a venue, that has nothing to do with Congress in almost every case.
Yeah.
If we're talking about travel related issues, Congress plays a role in it, but it's really about getting people to these markets. And sometimes that's more local. Do they have the right airlift? Do they have the right hotel capacity? Do they have the ability to move people around town? I mean, these are local issues. It's, do you have a pleasing market is more important than, can we get somebody here from Dubai, most of the time.
Yeah, correct. So let me kind of come to the end of this by asking your opinion, probably on a big picture scale, of what are the greatest challenges in trying to educate elected officials? Is it access, or is it them really listening, or what do you think it is today?
Yeah, it's a good question. Excuse me. It's hard to get the actual, if you're looking at federal, it's hard to get the actual members' time and attention. Usually it's best to work with their staff and be satisfied that that's an effective place to go. I think a lot of people federally look and say, if I'm not talking to the congressman or senator, then I'm not making impact. In reality, if you're talking to the congressman and senator, you're probably not making impact. If you're talking to the staff and having a compelling discussion with follow-up, there's where you're going to get something done. They're the ones that are really doing most of the work. If at the local level, you're much more likely to get to the actual office holder and have an impact. And there, I think it's not as much about access or getting their time. I think it's about having a true reason to go and do it and being prepared when you do and have something meaningful to talk about. If I set up a half-hour meeting with my local congressman, I better have a half hour of worthwhile content, maybe 25 minutes, because there's going to be 5 minutes of shooting the bull. But like most everybody else, if you lose their attention in the first few minutes, it's gone, and they'll end that meeting in 5 minutes versus the 30 minutes that were allotted. And that's the same with your city council member. It's the same with the governor. And I think the key is being prepared. Getting access is a lot easier than using the access that you got effectively. And you get, it's like everything else, you get one shot or two shots at being successful with that first message. And if you go in unprepared, it doesn't matter if you met somebody and that you got your name out, if you don't have a reason. And often that should accompany some ask, even if it's not the easier ask in the first meeting is best, because if they feel like they can do something for you early on, they've cemented some type of relationship with you by doing something that was essentially no effort for them. You've got a great platform to get started and you educated them on what you're doing.
I love that. Using the access effectively. Yep. is a really great point. Getting in the room is relatively easy in many cases yep. because they want to hear from their constituents. But using that time effective for both parties, being able right. to go in and say, you really need to know this because this does affect your district or whatever your elected region is. Aaron, I think you and I could go on with this for quite a while as we both have the same passion for being able to speak out and create influence and be effective in doing that. Do you have any final thoughts today as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think, one of the questions you asked me in advance was, why is, in my opinion, why is advocacy so important? And I think the real answer on that is, I don't know, we never know. And that's why it's so important, because we really don't know why or when it's going to be so important until we need it. And once we need it, then it's crystal clear. But if we haven't done some of the groundwork in advance, if we haven't done relationship building and build exposure for ourselves, for our brand, for our industry, whatever it is, then it's going to be too difficult to get where we need to get quick enough when there's a matter. And I'm not talking just federal, I'm talking about local. Take a little bit of time to get to know the people that have impact in the community. It's not always elected officials, but often it is. It could be a city manager, it could be the economic development director, whoever it is, but we don't know why that's so important until we need it. And I think that's the most important thing about advocacy for me is it becomes a need. It's not always there. The need to do it's always there, but it becomes a need after after something comes up.
And you never know that what was reality today at this minute in time doesn't change in a half hour because of some act that neither party had anything to do with. but just totally changes the focus of where the priorities are. And we see that all the time.
And that can be an issue in government. It could be an issue in our business or industry. So if you look back in the exhibitions industry, if we go back to, the 9/11, could have had huge impact on our industry, and we addressed certain things related to security to make sure that it was minimized. The Great Recession had impact, and now the pandemic. And in each of these cases, there have been reasons why we needed to engage, mostly locally, but some federally, to make sure that we were prepared to return. And those all came up just like that. Those weren't things that you could plan for and prepare for, other than knowing the right people and having relationships.
Well said. And I think I want to end on that positive note there. So that's a wrap up of today's great conversation with Aaron Bludworth, CEO of Fern Expo. Aaron, again, thank you for being on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Roger.
And now it's time for the advocacy engagement. Now, today's tip is governing is not easy, nor should it be. Democracy is messy, and it should be. So educate yourself. The media supplies a 24/7 opportunity to hear the latest breaking news. And it seems to me that everything is breaking news these days. So listen for real experts, not political pundits, tasked with spewing the party talking points, but make sure to verify what you're hearing and reading. Sift out fake news. Seek true experts on a topic. Find and understand opposing viewpoints to create balance in your thinking and reaffirm your position. We often believe that an issue is clear-cut and easy to pick a side. Aaron and I talked about that today, that often it necessarily isn't, and it can change on a dime. Then the more we know, the more we realize these nuances, often leading us to more pragmatic thinking. We would like to thank our sponsor, Rap Index. Know who your people know. Go to rapindex.com. That's rapindex.com, and tell them Roger sent you for a special offer. In upcoming episodes, you'll be treated to inspiring interviews from leaders in the world of politics, associations, and nonprofit causes. If you like today's podcast, head over to where you find your podcast, be it Apple, Google, or Spotify. And now you can even say, hey, Alexa, play the Voices in Advocacy podcast. A big thank you again to Aaron for being on the show today. I greatly appreciate your time and passion in helping others through advocacy. Well, that's it for this episode of Voices in Advocacy. Remember, you have the power to be an effective and influential advocate. Now, go out and make it a better world.
We hope you enjoyed today's Voices in Advocacy podcast and look forward to you joining us again next week. To learn more about Voices in Advocacy, go to our website, voicesinadvocacy.com.